on Friday evening and come in for a crash course for 48 hours, and then they go back to the lab by Monday morning. Now, we do get quite a few scientists who come along. So, it's a difficult challenge, though, because I think the wrong ideas about the theology of creation are so embedded, out there in the public domain and the minds of journalists. The other thing is to educate journalists and to try and get them to, there is a course every summer for top journalists in Cambridge where we have my colleagues. It's not a Faraday course. We have 10, 12 top journalists, mostly from North America, not entirely, who come for a whole 5 weeks, program seminars and projects and all that kind of thing. And the whole aim is to try and help them to understand the real issues in the science-religion discussion. So it's a bit of a long answer, but it's such an important question, yes. The question here was about Simon Conway Morris and his book, Inevitable Humans in a Lonely Universe, Life Solution. So an excellent book, recommended by everybody. I'll give a plug for Simon there. And it's basically about convergence and this idea, which has been known for a very long time, that the same organs or the same biochemical pathways, the same structures evolve repeatedly, again and again, independently, in different evolutionary lineages. And really, Simon's book is a huge compendium, really, of all these examples, and they're very, very impressive. They're not, in themselves, at all controversial. I mean, convergence has been known for decades, and it's found in any good, biology textbook and so forth and so on. I mean, Richard Dawkins gives many examples of convergence in his writings as well. Of course, it's how you interpret what that means. But, of course, what Simon is doing is, in a sense, using those data to counteract the idea of Stephen Jay Gould, the late Stephen Jay Gould, that evolutionary history is simply stochastic. It could have gone completely differently. That if you rewind the tape of life again, everything would have ended up in a very different kind of way. You certainly wouldn't have got us. That's the sort of Stephen Jay Gould message. And Simon is saying, well, actually, if you look at the data, it doesn't look that way. It actually looks, if you rewind the tape of life again, it's likely you'll have something that looks pretty similar, actually. And so his view is if you find life anywhere in the universe, since we know the chemistry of the universe is very uniform, I mean, I think we pretty much know that, because we can see such a far way back in time, into the distant recesses of the galaxies. The chemistry is the same, so the biochemistry is going to be the same. So probably carbon-based life, and it'd be a great disappointment to science fiction enthusiasts, when we get to this other planet and look around for the life, it might just look, well, a bit like this room, really, so it might be quite similar. So, in other words, that's Simon's point, really, that if you replay the tape of life again, that it actually will converge, on these solutions to the design space, that you can sort of envisage this planet as thousands and thousands of holes, gaps, design space, and what evolution is doing is sort of exploring the world of design and filling up these different ecological niches with different species, so that the marsupials in Australia, which have evolved separately and independently from those in Africa, the placentals, end up actually looking very similar. You can match them up quite nicely. Very nice examples. So, yeah, I think it's a good point and a strong point, and it's much more consistent with the idea of a God who has intentions and purposes for the created order than it is with the ideas of Dan Dennett and Stephen Jay Gould and others that, the whole thing is just random and stochastic, and it could have ended up a completely different way. It doesn't seem to be the case. It doesn't seem to be the case. So I think Simon is making a good and strong point. And he's very well respected in the biological research community. If you look at the Darwin anniversary edition of Nature, which came out February the 12th, just 2 weeks ago, I noticed he's quoted 4 or 5 times, probably, in the course. There's 6 articles there about evolution. A couple of them are about convergence. One of them is particularly about island evolution. And Simon is quoted several times. So he's well thought of in the biological research community, and helps to address the question of the chap over here, that voices like that out in the biological community are important voices. Yeah. I guess there are, of course, Teilhard de Chardin you could take as your exemplar in some ways, who kind of incorporated actually Lamarckian evolution, not Darwinian evolution, a significant point. The French were always rather keen on Lamarck for some reason. But so incorporated that within this great theological scheme, you know, where actually evolution meets the omega point, it kind of ends up with the omega point, which is almost identified with Christ. So, and to my mind, went far too far in trying to build a theology out of science, which I think is a risky business, actually. So there have been people who haven't gone quite that far, but who are trying to build evolutionary biology into a kind of eschatological scheme of things. I suppose I'm somewhat suspicious of that. I don't go that way myself, because I think when we look at evolution of humans, for example, there are good biological reasons for thinking that we're not going to evolve much more. You know, that, I could go into that if you like, but I mean, there's about 3 or 4 reasons why it's very likely that human evolution has stopped, or, you know, is completely slowed down. Okay, so if you leave aside genetic engineering and reshaping our genomes, if you leave that kind of stuff on one side, then if you're just looking at the evolutionary process, it doesn't look like we're going anywhere in terms of improvement or degeneration or whatever. You know, I mean, we're just carrying on the same way we are. We're one global interbreeding village. Okay, that's not a good basis for speciation, that's for sure. So I don't think eschatological sort of schema really work when it comes to the biology, actually. And I mean, my hope is in the coming again of Christ, in the second coming, when we better be ready. You know, so it's sort of linked to that, really, and the ushering in of the new heavens and the new earth. But of course, with that continuity, where all the best things, you know, the best science and the best art, best theology, I don't know, you know, will be incorporated within the fulfilled kingdom of God. That to me is very important. So, but it doesn't really fit, yeah, I don't think there's enough match to make a whole theological story out of the evolutionary story in that way. I may be wrong, but I sort of think it's problematic. Yep.